All right, here we go. I want to talk about the 56-unit apartment complex that was the first real estate investment that me and my parents did together as partners. And this was actually the first real estate investment that I did at all. Like, even before buying a primary residence, which is pretty crazy. I hadn't even used my VA loan at this point, but I had already purchased a 56-unit apartment complex. And so I'm going to break down exactly how I did that. Okay, well, I'm going to go through and pretend that I'm back who I was back then, first lieutenant in the Marine Corps at my flight squadron, and I'll tell you what I had to do to make it happen. And so if you want a story that is, not all like sunshine and rainbows, but just the down and dirty, exactly what happened, sit back and relax, and I'll tell you exactly how I was able to do it. All right. So, also, this is day 17. I got a check of my 30-day vlog YouTube challenge. So if you like learning about real estate investing, and if you're in the military, this is going to be extra super valuable to you. So please like, subscribe, share, all the things. All right, here we go. So I wanted to buy real estate sometime around the time I started wanting to. I got this bug. I wanted to call myself a real estate investor when I started dating my now wife. She was, like myself, a Ukrainian, and so I'm third generation who actually ended up being born and living in Ukraine most of my life until I was 15 and a half. She was still actually a Ukrainian citizen who was studying winemaking in France, and I wanted to visit her more often, so I needed more income to make this happen. So as a second lieutenant, I was like, hey, not bad money, but like, it's not exactly that easy to go travel to Europe that much to go visit her. So I decided to look into making more money. And so I discovered real estate, and I discovered how many incredible benefits real estate has. We're not going to get into that now. I have other videos like the 6 profit centers of real estate that I'll link to up here if you want to watch that, or somewhere up here. But the way I got into this 56 unit was absolute conviction. I knew that I wanted to do real estate. I knew that I wanted to create more income while I was still alive, not just to pass down to generations for years to come, or for generations to come after me. I wanted to live a better life now. But I also knew that there was no get-rich-quick scheme with this stuff. It wasn't going to happen overnight, but it was a path well followed by many, 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 many military members, and even more, just Americans, and probably entrepreneurs around the world. Not probably, definitely. And so I wanted to get into real estate because I knew that there was a way to buy real estate smartly, to where it wasn't just like you're buying a stock or a bond or something and you're just waiting for it to grow in value, but that it actually cash flow, like it'll make you money every single month. And so I was absolutely convinced that real estate was my thing. And so I started talking to my parents about partnering, because the one thing I realized that was unique about real estate was that it was possible to use other people's money. I could bring my own cash. I could raise money from other individuals. We could go halvesies. We could structure it in any way we wanted. And so I decided early on that I was going to figure out how to leverage other people and other people's money and my time, dedication, and experience to kind of bring those two value sets together and buy real estate. And so I talked to my parents. I was like, look, y'all have these 529s that you have saved up for my siblings, right? I'm the oldest of 7. So they had these 529 IRA accounts for their education. I was like, y'all, I think we can put that money to better use. And then also they had money saved away as a nest egg that they couldn't touch for probably another, at that time, like 7 or 8 years. So I was like, hey, how about this? Let's do something smart with the 529s. How about you let me partner with you all on an investment property, and we start making income for you every single month. And if you like it, and if you see where I'm going with this, by the time your annuities mature and you're allowed to pull them out tax-free, or the gains, or I can't remember exactly how their accounts were set up. But point is, when you weren't going to have to pay extra penalties on pulling that out after my dad was 59 and a half, essentially, then that's when we could invest more money, because they would have seen the outcome of investing in real estate successfully. So we started looking for properties. We found many, many different properties, everything from like whole portfolios of single family properties to, I remember specifically, it was like a 72 unit in Bexley, Ohio, that we almost purchased. We were under contract for half a year, but there was a bad environmental report that came back while we were under contract. So we spent somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 on attorney fees and doing new inspections, meaning we had to do like sampling of the soil, and we had to do one report, which is basically a historical report. It's a phase one. They look at like, hey, what are the odds that this might have issues? Sure enough, they looked at the historicals. They were like, yeah, this might have issues. Then they dug into the soil to get some samples. Then they dug in again to get some more samples. This cost tons of money, by the way. All to find out that there's some really, really, really bad minerals or really, really bad like metallic. I can't even remember what it was. I think it was like lead and some other bad heavy metals in the soil. So I was like, okay, we can't get this. This thing might get condemned. Turns out there was like a lot of, in the 50s, they were actually depositing a bunch of like old batteries in like this, basically it was like a landfill, and somebody thought they would build an apartment complex on top of that. Terrible idea. The worst thing is that the numbers would have been awesome. Like this property was supposed to be a really good deal, but we didn't want to buy something that was about to get condemned. Plus the lender wasn't going to lend on it. So moving on to the next deal, my parents were getting kind of like antsy. They were like, hey, they had a lot of life changes going on. And they really wanted to start investing because they started realizing what I was saying made sense. They needed to have a plan for the future. They couldn't just chip away at their savings because they had 7 kids and they wanted to live, have a normal retirement, have maybe a self-built pension, so to speak. And so finally I found a property, and it wasn't in Ohio. It was a little bit farther away. It was about 5.5 hours away from my parents. It was just outside of Indianapolis, and it was a 56 unit. And so we acquired this property and we overpaid for it, but we knew that it was something we just needed to get our foot in the door. And we knew with time things would correct and it would take care of us. Also, this one was turnkey. Basically no like crazy renovations required. For the most part, every single unit was renovated to an extent, and we didn't have to do a bunch of extra work, and we weren't really experienced in that anyway, so this was great. So we bought this property for $2.6 million. And now, fast forward past many, many, many different lessons learned, bad property managers, good property managers, bad property managers again, now good property manager again. We have finally gotten to a point where it's worth close to $4 million, actually probably even more, and we're raising rents still because we're way below market, and it's going to cash flow even better for my family, and it's pretty exciting. But how did we actually acquire it? Like, let's get back to what's the process, okay? So here's what we had to do. We had to put in a letter of intent. So this is basically like something that you put in before a contract. So we had to, it's called an LOI. You basically outline the terms that you plan on having in the contract, and you want to stick as true to that as possible. Otherwise, you might start making a bad name for yourself. So we filled out this LOI. We're like, hey, this is the price we want. It's basically an offer. Like if you're thinking about single family homes, it's kind of like an offer. But there's more terms like, hey, this is the kind of financing we're going to use. This is where we're going to get the down payment money. This is how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to do this. This is how many days we want to do inspections. This is how many days it's going to take us to close, yada, yada, yada. And we made it happen. So now that we were ready to buy this property, right, we had an amazing lender, which I'll probably link up here somewhere and below, to help us acquire this property, right? And it was a painful process, I'm not gonna lie, because we did a Freddie Mac SBL loan, which means a small balance loan, which is, I believe, properties anywhere between 1 and maybe 5, maybe they increased that now, $1 million of debt, right? And so this was for like the smaller multifamilies, not like the hundreds of units. And this one, it's a non-recourse loan, which means we wouldn't be liable at a default outside of any bad boys, is what they call them, carve-outs. Like if we do something that's egregious and we like neglected the property, then we would be like the ones on the hook for the loan. But for the most part, because of how conservative of an investment this was, the purchase price compared to how well the property performed, Freddie Mac decided, hey, we trust that this property will basically sustain itself as long as you have a decent property manager and that has experience. And so that's why they lend to us. The other thing they had to look at was our net worth, liquidity, and where our down payment was going to come from, and what the debt service coverage ratio was. So essentially they needed to see what the net worth was. Okay, so they looked at me, my mom, and my dad. They looked at how much money they had outside of what the down payment was going to be. And they saw that my dad had that nest egg that he didn't want to touch, but at least that allowed for them to know that he could come up with a significant portion of cash if he had to service the debt if all hell broke loose, right? He had reserves. The other thing they want to look into is how much liquidity did we have, like just how much cash did we have in general to bring to the closing table for the down payment, and then immediately available afterwards to service the loan if there was some kind of repositioning period. This property in particular didn't have to be repositioned, meaning it didn't have to be renovated. It wasn't underwater. It was cash flowing day one. So fortunately, we actually didn't have to escrow any of that kind of money, meaning our title company didn't have to hold on to any of that kind of money, and then the servicing company didn't have to hold on to any of our additional cash. So we were able to just kind of jump right in, which was nice. And the other thing they looked at, like I mentioned, was DSCR, or debt service coverage ratio. And so what that means is how much money is this making compared to how much the expenses in the loan are, right? They want to see, can the property basically pay for itself? If it can, you're good. And so what we shoot for is like a 1.25. We want it to make more money than it actually costs. And that's how you find a good property. You just run the numbers, really. And so this property was penciling out just fine. But the thing was, we were first-time borrowers for this type of a commercial deal. We had no experience whatsoever. We weren't even bringing on investors that had any kind of experience at all. It was just me, my dad, and my mom. So what we had to do is we had to write all sorts of letters, and we had to give them all sorts of proof that we were like decent people and that we had experience with life in general, and that we had critical thinking skills. We could figure it out. So we had to write up all this stuff, and we had to show them that we were going to use a knowledgeable property manager to kind of be in our corner with the regular like day-to-day real estate stuff. So, my dad has a PhD in nuclear engineering, physics, and all sorts of stuff. So that kind of helped his credibility, and he's worked for all sorts of cool jobs. But anyway, and then I was in the military, and my mom had a graphic design background. And I would argue that managing 7 kids is sometimes probably crazier than managing investments. And so my parents and I, combined with all of our reputation, our experience, and everything written up, qualified for the loan, because my dad had that nest egg saved up. They had the down payment from the 529s. So they had their net worth, they had their liquidity, they had the DSCR covered, meaning the property performed well enough to cover its own expenses and debt. And so that's why we qualified. Now, it was a marathon. It was all sorts of paperwork, all sorts of stuff we had to fill out. But it was well worth it. The property, we actually were supposed to sell it last year. And we were supposed to net like $1.7 million on the sale, but I'm really glad we didn't, because what we're finding out right now is the amount of rent inflation that's happened recently, that we're able to now increase rents without any trouble. Like, we literally have a wait list, and that would allow us to increase the value of this property probably up to about $5 million in the next 2 or 3 years. So it's really awesome that we have an opportunity to continue holding on to this property. We might have to refinance to cash some money out to capitalize another investment we're working on. But other than that, we can really continue riding this awesome wave that was this first step into real estate. And the craziest thing was, I was actually working on the Military Real Estate Investing Academy, which is basically like all the lessons learned and just me figuring all this out. I was building out like these PowerPoint lessons, and I recorded them as I was like in escrow on that property. I was so determined that I was going to be closing on this thing, and I wanted to show people what I had learned along the way. And I was also, a month later, I also closed on a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, little single-family home turnkey property. And so that was going to give me my credibility to kind of teach other military members how to get into this stuff. But that was just like my first deal, my first 2 deals, all in the same year. But even before closing, I had already started building out like the academy, because it was just, my mindset was like, I have learned so much failing so many times. For like a year and a half, I kept failing getting any kind of properties, like that one in Ohio. And I felt like I had so much knowledge. I needed to brain dump it somewhere, and I wanted to teach it to other people. It was just a very strong drive and passion. Now, frankly, the other aspect of it was, at this point, I started thinking like, hey, maybe this is going to be my calling after the military. Maybe this is what I'm going to be doing full time someday. And so what I mean by full time is real estate. And so I was like, how can I buy more real estate faster? Maybe I can teach others how to buy real estate and sell my education and sell my time and attention and helping them go through the steps. And maybe that could help me buy more real estate faster. That was frankly my plan. And then what ended up happening was active duty passive income, ADPI, this education community that I started building grew massively, and the team members started growing. And it was incredible to see this massive movement happening, and now so many of our team members and community members helping each other buy more and more of real estate. So if you're watching this, you're like, yo, how can I get involved? Listen, you can go to our website if you want to like do the paid education, if you want to like really kind of accelerate where you're going, or you can just join our Facebook group. You can listen to our podcast, Active Duty Passive Income. You can download the Military House Hacking book for free. You can do you can do a lot for free. You can do some for paid if you want to be around others that are kind of fast tracking where they're headed with this. Or if you're like just trying to learn right now, definitely check out adpicon.com. It's our conference. This is the second annual one. If you're watching this in 2023, it's going to be our second annual one, and that's where you really you figure out what the next steps are. Plus, it's an extremely fun conference. So without further ado, I'm going to wrap this video up. That's how I got my 56 unit. If you have any questions, please let me know. This was Mark Yancich. With that, I'm out, and I'm going to press the red button on my remote. See you later.